How does the new Oris Aquis Date Calibre 400 compare with the regular Aquis Date? And is the additional cost worth it? Over several weeks, I did a hands-on, in-depth review of both watches along with the Calibre 400 movement. I'll let you know what I found and my impressions on both watches in this episode of Adventures with Time. In this video, I'll give you my in-depth review of both the Oris Aquis Date Calibre 400 and the regular Oris Aquis Date, covering their differences, design, aesthetics, wearability, and value proposition. Because there's a lot of information I cover, I've added time codes for ease of viewing. Check them out in the comments below or in this time bar. After I published my video on the Oris line of watches a couple of weeks ago, I was contacted by Oris asking if I'd like to borrow some watches to experience in person. I jumped at the opportunity and requested both the new Oris Aquis Date Calibre 400 and the regular Oris Aquis Date, so I could make a side-by-side comparison. Not only did I receive these two watches, they also sent me the Virtual Reality Calibre 400 Experience Kit. I made an unboxing video at the start of my 30-day loan period. I'll leave links to that video below and to my other video that covers the entire Oris collection. I've had these two watches for about 3 weeks, and I've not only examined them at my desk, I've worn them in many situations. And to get a good and equal comparison, I've worn both on my left and right wrist, switching them occasionally, so I get a balanced view of wearability. And because they use the same case and bracelet, wearability should be the same on either wrist. And in fact, that's what I found. And sometimes I forget which watch I have on which wrist. If you've watched or read other reviews of the Aquis Calibre 400, you've probably heard about suspected issues with this movement, and I use the word suspected purposely. I will describe my experience and opinion on these, but since there are differing attitudes I've heard, I want to first review the watch design and compare it to the regular Aquis Date before I introduce any potential prejudice to you. There are a few differences I've distilled beyond the movement, and you may consider some of these as nitpicking. But as I said, I did a detailed desktop inspection, so why not share what I found with you? Let's start with the specifications of these watches. Case widths are the same at 43.5 millimeters, as measured at the bezel. There is a slight increase in thickness on the Calibre 400 model. My only guess on thickness is that the screw-down case back is a tad thicker to accommodate the Calibre 400 movement, but I could very well be wrong about that. In any case, the differences are imperceptible. Both watches weigh about 174 grams, with the Calibre 400 just a half a gram lighter. At this weight and diameter of 43 millimeters, it is comparable in weight to my Islander Diver at 41.8 millimeters and my Sin 104 at 41 millimeters. So not a light watch, but appropriate for a solidly made dive watch. You may feel the watch on your wrist, but it shouldn't be a bother. The lugs are just a little different given the quick release mechanism on the bracelet. I'll review how this works later on. One aesthetic difference is the color of the dial. Now the regular Aquis Date comes in a lot of color varieties, including this blue. But you'll find the dial on the Calibre 400 model to have a lighter shade of blue, and the starburst effect seems to be more prominent. Not sure if that's due to the lighter color or the actual textured finish on the dial. I've actually gone back and forth over my time with these watches as to which I prefer. I tend to like the darker blue more, but the lighter blue just seems more alive. While we're on the dial, there are a few more subtle differences. The Oris name has been made just a bit smaller on the Calibre 400 model. Not sure why. Any guesses? They've of course added the word 5 days to the writing down by the 6 o'clock. Doesn't bother me much. Some people have complained that there's too much writing down below. And the date window and text of that date wheel has been made larger for readability, and it's been moved closer to the dial edge. I guess if you're making your own movement, you can increase the size of the dial wheel and hence the font. This in turn then has driven some other changes to the hour and minute markers around the 6 o'clock position. The already truncated 6 o'clock index on the regular Aquis Date has been replaced by just a pip, and the 2 minute markers on either side are totally removed. As someone who needs reading glasses, I appreciate the larger date font. Does a missing applied index make a difference? I must say I didn't notice it at first, so perhaps not. From what I can tell, the rest of the dial features remain unchanged. There are also differences in the bezel color. The regular Aquis Date model has a black ceramic bezel, while the Calibre 400 model has a lighter blue-gray color. I think this new bezel color makes the Calibre 400 model stand out a bit more. What's your preference, and would it be a determining factor in which watch you selected? Other than the movement, which I promise I'll get to, there aren't any other differences between these watches. But since this is the first time I've had an Aquis on my wrist for any length of time, let me give you my overall impression on the watch for design, aesthetics, and wearability. And other than the differences in the dial and bracelet I've already discussed, my following thoughts are applicable to either model. The overall impression one gets from the Aquis Date is that it is a modern-day dive watch with a definite tool feel, enhanced by the beefy lugs, flat case edges, and large crown guards, which, by the way, are attached by screws, which suggests they can be replaced if damaged. But then put the watch on your wrist and it morphs into a cleanly designed watch with sharp features. This feeling is enhanced by the applied hour indices with polished side trim and a slight bevel towards the dial center. The hour and minute hands follow this arrangement by having silver-trimmed white hands. This is a watch that I feel fits equally in the water or with a sports jacket. But let's take a detailed tour of this watch. As mentioned, the dial has these nice applied and beveled hour markers with an intermittently inked minute track. The obelisk hands seem to both be very readable and blend nicely into the dial, affording plenty of landscape to provide a nice sunburst effect. A nice application of Superluminova BGW9 is applied to the hour markers, hands, and just the pip of the bezel. I know some of you out there would have liked to see lume on all of the bezel indicators. And note, the hour hand is not only shorter, but has a break in the lume so it's easily distinguishable from the minute hand. We have a slightly double-domed front sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating on the underside. However, there does seem to be a lot of reflection, occasionally causing diminished readability. I think they could have done with a heavier dose of AR coating. We have a 120-click unidirectional dive bezel with a coin edge that overhangs the case slightly to, theoretically, provide a better grip. However, I find I have to apply some decent pressure to ensure my fingers don't slip. If you look closely, the coin edge is smoothed a bit, which reduces friction. Now, while I'm not a bezel aficionado, the mechanism seems top-notch with distinctive clicks and no backplay. The case has some interesting design elements. To allow the bezel to overhang the case, there is a slight conical shape to the sides. This is a nice design touch. The case has a mostly brushed finish with only polishing on the top of the lugs. And we already discussed the crown guards, which, by the way, also have polished tops to match the lugs. Another interesting aspect is the use of these tri-pointed slotted screw heads on both the crown guards and the end link of the bracelet. I don't know if they use these as a style statement or to require one to really go to a watchmaker to remove them, but the bracelet links use standard single slot screws. Now, the bracelet has one of the features that watch enthusiasts may not like. Rather than using the standard lug and spring bar bracelet connection mechanism, the Aquis Date uses an integrated connection between case and bracelet. The downside is that one has a limited selection of straps or bracelet. Oris offers this bracelet or a rubber strap. I haven't seen any third-party straps that will work, but maybe they exist. But a plus is the seamless look, making the bracelet and case appear as a single unit, especially given the continued brushed center and polished outside of the links. I think this gives the watch a very graceful and classy look. Nevertheless, if you want to change looks, the quick release mechanism is simple and makes for fast changes between the bracelet and the rubber strap. The bracelet itself drapes beautifully around the wrist, given that the individual parts of each link have full range of motion. I found that the fit on my 7 7/8 wrist is very comfortable. You get a fully milled clasp with a brushed finish and the Oris brand. The double pushers close with a solid and assured click. There is an integrated dive extension, but only 3 micro-adjustment positions in the clasp. I don't know if Oris offers half links, but either way, the micro-adjustment capability is a bit limited. I think a sliding ratchet quick adjustment mechanism really belongs on a watch at this level. Probably another gap for watch enthusiasts, but not one that will keep someone from a purchase. Finally, the screw-down case back on the Aquis Date 400 has an enlarged sapphire crystal, much larger than that of the Aquis Date, presumably to show off the new Calibre 400 movement, though I must say that there isn't much to look at. You do get a view of the dual barrels and the balance spring, but the rest of the movement is hidden by this large sandblasted plate etched with movement specifics. And we have a skeletonized rotor with the Oris logo. And speaking of the movement, let's take a look and see what this has to offer, and what I found after studying it for several weeks, and what might be the biggest issue for the watch enthusiast. Of course, the Calibre 400 model costs more than the regular Aquis Date, $3,500 US list versus $2,200 on the bracelet. But is it worth the extra cost? The 5 key aspects of the Calibre 400 that Oris touts are 5-day power reserve, 10-year warranty, 10-year recommended service interval, higher stability rotor system, and greater protection from magnetism. They also state, as you saw on the rotor, that it is adjusted to 5 positions. So clearly, accuracy is another benefit they believe is important. Before I give you my thoughts and experience on the movement, let's take a look at the Calibre 400 Experience Kit Oris lent me. You won't get the full 3D and virtual reality effect since I'm only recording through one eyepiece. Essentially, they are building the movement in pieces, and you can scan in any direction to see the various components and how they connect and interact with other parts. It's a much better experience than what you see here. Plus, you can replay the show many times to view it from different angles. Oris also sent me this separate Calibre 400 movement, sealed in a plastic shell to examine close up. It's a working movement that you can wind, quick set the date, and hack to set the time. It's a nice addition to the VR Experience Kit, but not much more than you can see through the actual watch's exhibition caseback. Okay, now let me give you a rundown of my thoughts on the attributes of this movement. The 5-day power reserve. Compare that to the 38 hours, or roughly a day and a half, that you get with the Sellita movement in the regular Aquis Date. What does that really mean to you? It means you can put your watch down over the weekend or for several days without it running out of power and needing to have its time and maybe date set when you put it back on your wrist. How much value does that represent to you? To me, while I'm interested in the double barrel technology, I don't think this is sufficient for me to spend the extra money. What about you? However, the 10-year warranty and recommended service interval is something that I value. Having been a watch collector for a little over 3 years, I have yet to incur any service costs. However, I do worry about the days when servicing my watches starts to kick in. But does cutting service frequency in half offset the cost of servicing an in-house movement versus a Sellita movement? Maybe you'll save a little money. To me, the anti-magnetism, or I should say greater resistance to magnetic fields, is something I come to value as my experience grows. The Calibre 400 uses non-ferrous and anti-magnetic components, including a silicone escapement, such that it deviated less than 10 seconds a day after exposure to 2,250 Gauss. This exceeds the ISO 764 standard. But now I need to report to you the performance I've seen with these watches. Perhaps the biggest drawback I see with the Calibre 400 is the jumping minute hand sometimes experienced during hacking. You might have read about this elsewhere. This happened to me the first time I tried to set the time. When I saw this, I thought I was unintentionally turning the crown as I was pushing it back into the second position, causing the minute hand to move. But then I started to read about this quirk and understood it is not something I'm introducing. I reached out to the marketing representative who lent me these watches. Here is their response. The characteristic of two barrels means that the teeth on the two barrels must work together. Sometimes when you pull the crown out and change the time, the barrels will be out of sync, which is why some people have seen the minute hand jump. This is why we recommend turning the crown a little past the time you would like to set. Then turn the crown back to the correct time before pushing back in to get the barrels to sync again. I have heard that other movements with two barrels experience the same phenomenon. I've tried this Oris recommendation, and this seemed to work consistently. Now, I'm somewhat of a perfectionist who, when setting the time, likes to be as precise as possible. This quirk would drive me crazy and totally turn me off, but given a reliable workaround, I believe this would not discourage me from the watch. The movement, as we said, has been adjusted to 5 positions and has an expected accuracy of -3 to +5 seconds a day. I've been getting an average of +4 seconds a day, so it lives up to that claim and greatly surpasses the accuracy of the Sellita movement in the regular Aquis Date. This level of accuracy is great to have, since given the extended power reserve, one would probably not have to set the time until it became significantly out of sync with the actual time. Finally, I tested the 120 hours of power reserve. I've seen some complaints that this movement doesn't deliver 5 days. So before I tested it, I inquired with Oris how to ensure one has powered up the dual barrels sufficiently to attain this maximum power reserve. And here is their response. The crown needs to be wound 210 times, with a full 360 degrees around being one time, to be fully wound. The fact that this movement is a new innovation with 2 mainsprings and sliding bearing to reduce friction and increase life of the movement, the amount of activity to get to a full 5 days power reserve and not be what many people are used to. I found that I need to perform 420 turns of the crown, since my winding technique results in just 180 degrees with each turn. To execute 420 turns took about 5 minutes of constant action. That's a long time, and I can imagine that some may not have spent that much time winding. So after sufficient winding, did I get 5 days of power? Yep, and with an average accuracy of 4 seconds per day. But the unanswered question I have is whether one gets sufficient automatic winding during daily wear to have the mainsprings remain fully wound. You can probably gather from what I've said in this video that I think the Aquis Date is a beautiful watch in the style of a modern diver. The materials and finishing are all very good, and I can live with the idiosyncrasies of the dual barrels, given that there is a way around it. Since I'm only a desktop diver, I would tend to keep this watch on the bracelet, and given it's a bracelet of high quality, I would not reject it given the strap limitations. I do wish, though, that they offered a variety of dial colors. Perhaps that is to come. Whether or not the watch is worth the price is something I continue to struggle with as someone who is relatively new into watches. In comparison to the list price of $3,500, the Tudor Black Bay is currently $3,700 US list. I'm not sure if either the Oris or Tudor can be purchased at a discount from a real AD. Now, perhaps a good comparison is the Sellita-based Aquis Date, which lists for $2,200 US, and the Manta Ocean King, which lists for $2,140, and comes with the Sellita SW300. If one considers these two watches to be on the same tier, then the question becomes, would I pay the additional price for the Aquis Date Calibre 400 to get these features? I think that between the Aquis Date and the Aquis Calibre 400, I would spring for the higher end model. Not solely because of the touted benefits, but mostly because I'm the type of person who tends to go for the better model when there is a choice that doesn't have an enormous cost difference. I understand everyone has their own criteria and cost tolerances, and I'm not here to convince anyone to purchase or pass on a specific watch. I want to provide you with information and, yes, my opinion on watches, but I believe everyone has to make their own decisions and do their own due diligence and not be swayed by other collectors. So I ask you, what's your opinion of the Oris Aquis Date Calibre 400? Is it something that intrigues you? Thanks for watching, and until my next video, I leave you with links to these two videos which you may enjoy.